Okay, so to get this painting started, the first thing that you're going to need is your orange paint. I know that Sarah said that you all had a lot of orange in your paint kit. So we're going to start on the background with that. I'm going to set this here for reference too. You will want to make sure that you have a cup of water, something to use as a paint palette. I use plates or like an old plastic tray or whatever you can use. And then you'll want a couple different size brushes. There's no specific type of brush that you have to have for this, so whatever you have will work. And then you'll want some type of rag. So I just use like an old t-shirt, but you can use paper towels or napkins, whatever works best for you. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Hannah Waters. I'm an admissions counselor at BridgeValley, and I received my MFA at CCAD in Columbus for fine arts. So I like being able to do these kinds of things. Gets me back in the art practice a little bit. Okay, if you all have any questions or anything, or if you need me to slow down or whatever, I'm going to try to move slow because I know that sometimes I can move a little bit faster through these. But if you have any questions, feel free to just hop on and ask. So we're going to start out with orange. I'm going to use a little bit of a bigger brush. It's not a huge brush, but it is flat. And I'm going to start by getting that brush a little bit wet. Dipping it in my orange, and then we're going to go down pretty far because if you see on the reference photo here, you know, this orange background takes over a good amount. So what I'm probably going to do is just have orange come all the way down to like here-ish, because you want to make sure you don't have any white canvas underneath peeping out when you're working on your flower. So I'm just starting with orange, and I'm going to start a basic layer all over the background because what we're going to do after we get this flat orange layer down is we're going to go over it with a lighter color and kind of blend it a little bit and give it that nice variation that we see in the reference photo. If you want to do your background on something other than orange, please feel free to do that. There aren't strict rules on this, and it's your painting. So if you're feeling like a red background or a blue background or something, you can definitely go ahead and do that and just apply these same basic things to whatever colors you use. So what you all probably have, I'm not 100% sure, but if your tube of orange says it's a hue, what that typically means is that it's not as pigmented as what just a regular paint color would be, which I had no idea about that until I was in school and they taught us that. Because a heavily pigmented paint color is more expensive, they make what are called hues in your paints. And they're a little bit thinner as far as like color goes. They're a little more transparent. So sometimes you just have to layer them on a little bit more. So if you have to do that with your orange, it's no big deal.
Chances are they have a hue.
Yeah, it's hard to find them without hues. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just have to add a little bit more. So if you're getting frustrated because you feel like it's not going on well, make sure you get your brush wet, because if your brush isn't wet enough, it will just drag, kind of like that, and won't really spread around. So you might need a little bit more water, and then you might just need to go over it a little bit more. But since we're adding in those lighter variations, it's not a big deal at all.
And Elle and Dominique, you all have orange because we ran out of yellow. So I put orange in there because, I mean, it's the closest and it'll still be pretty fun. Now, Mona, you probably, I don't know what you have, but if you have yellow, that's fine too.
Yeah, if you have yellow, you can treat this the exact same way with the yellow that you would the orange. The orange will complement the blue and the flower really well. It'll pop off of each other, but yellow works well too. So whatever, I always try to be kind of flexible with this stuff because everybody always has different things and just kind of have to roll with it. So this first part is not too, like, there's nothing too crazy happening. I'm just literally layering down orange all over. And the good thing about acrylic is that it dries really fast. So we can go over top of this with our flower and it won't blend or blur all together. and I use a lot of paint. So I don't think anyone on here has ever done one of these with me. So you'll always see me taking a break to put more paint on my palette because I'm kind of heavy-handed with it. I actually think I'm going to stand up for this for a little bit. And I need more orange, so I'm going to do that really quickly. Sarah, are you painting with us or are you just watching?
I'm just watching tonight since the cats.
Okay.
They will attack.
Whoever is painting, if whenever you get done with this orange background, if you want to just hop on and say, hey, done with the orange, you can definitely do that because I want to make sure I'm not moving too fast or too slow.
And you all are welcome to if you want to turn your cameras on, that's totally cool. Some people do on these and some people don't, so.
Yeah, no pressure if you don't feel comfortable, but you're more than welcome to. And sometimes people will turn them on because they like to show their canvas and say, hey, why does this look like this or whatever. And it's a little bit harder to do that kind of thing over a virtual meeting, but it's definitely still doable.
So my paint seems really watery and my brush is small, so it's leaving a lot of white space on there.
Watery paint will do that. If you feel like it's super watery, then you might not need to add any water to it. And then I'm trying to think of what you could use. Sometimes like an old sponge works really well to cover more area, or if you want to get really crazy, sometimes I'll even use my fingers if a brush isn't large enough. So feel free to get creative with that if you feel like the small brush isn't moving you as quickly as you'd want to, because I know sometimes that's really frustrating.
I think I'll just go back over it later.
Okay. Yeah, and I always tell people whenever we do these, like, you can always go back and make little changes, or sometimes I'll go back and clean things up after I work on them because I might not like the edges or something, or a shape of something.
Yeah, right. And I'll say, so the orange paint, now that you mentioned that, I remember which one that was. They were regular acrylic, Hannah, but I got them from Michael's, but they were very watery. There was a few of them that are like that. I think I think the blue is like that as well. So Elle and Dominique, just kind of keep that in mind. You probably won't need to add anything, like any water to those. And it's very weird. The rest of them are like a traditional thicker acrylic. So I don't know.
That's strange.
I know.
Yeah, and honestly, if you all feel like your colors aren't showing up super well, obviously for the background we won't need to do this, but like for the flower, when we go over top of some of this orange, if you want to put some white down first for your basic shapes underneath and then put the blue or the purple on top, you can do that just because it might help it show up a little bit if you feel like maybe the orange is coming through too much on the blue.
And I will say, whenever we do these at school, of course, everything is provided to you, and it's, you know, a little bit of a different setup to work out of jello shot containers with your paint. So everything is a little bit better. And I do have an order in for like new brushes and all that stuff. So like next year, we will start with a brand new paint, brand new brushes. It's gonna be nice.
Ooh, yeah. And then it'll hopefully be in person and we can actually interact in a space. Okay. So I've got my base orange layer down. You can see my wonky little shape here, but it doesn't matter because those flowers are gonna cover up most of that. I might even bring this orange down a little bit further just to be safe. And you can always go in, if you have some white peeking out in between your flower petals, you can go in and add some orange. It's just a little bit annoying to have to go in very carefully between the petals and try to add it in. So I like to help you all skip that step. That way you don't have to worry about it later. But once we have this down, since some of you are working with orange and that's what I'm going to be working with for this, I'm going to do orange and then add some white to it to lighten it up a little bit. And I'll show you all what that looks like, because what we're going to do is go in with a lighter color and just blend it in the background here to give it a little more variation, similar to our reference photo. You all can't see me, I'm over here mixing paint. All right, let's see. Okay, so I just mixed literally some white with my orange that I was already using for the background. I'm mixing it a little bit better with my brush, which you really shouldn't do, but I do it all the time. So it's kind of like a peachy color. And I'm just gonna go in and lightly bring that over top and just lightly pull it. So I don't wanna cover the whole thing. I'm just gonna kind of go throughout and add some variation spots. You can even add some different shapes because it doesn't have to look one way. We just want to give it value variation and some texture. That way it's not just flat orange. So what I'm going to do is add these white spots or these lighter spots. They're not white, but add these lighter spots, and then I'm going to clean my brush out and keep it just with water only and go over top and blend it in a little bit more. And you can decide here how much you want to add. That's entirely up to you. So I'm just getting some like big random kind of shapes on there. Bring some down here. That way we have some consistently all over. And then I'm gonna clean up my brush, just rinse it out in that water that we have. Dry it out a little bit, but not too much, because you'll go in with your wet paintbrush on top and use it to blend the lighter orange or yellow, whatever color you were using, back in on top. So I'll clean that off. And then I'm just going to go in. So you can just drag your brush carefully, lightly over top. And since we just did that darker orange on the background, it should just blend it together. And then I'll probably, what I'm doing is just cleaning my brush off, because it will get some paint on there. So cleaning it off and then just doing the same thing all over. And if you feel like the paint's not really like moving, get your brush just a little bit more wet and that should do it. So these like harsh edges, specifically like through here, obviously I don't want just like a big harsh edge, so I'm going to take that and move it around and just blend it. Do this throughout. And they don't all have to look the same. All the spots don't have to look the same at all. So when you get to a point where you're like, oh, I like that, we've got some water drips happening. If you have that happen, you might like it. Some people kind of like the drip look. If not, you can just dab at it a little bit. If you feel like you have too many like lines going this way on your background too, you can take your paintbrush and do a similar thing and just kind of swirl it in circles, and that'll blend it out to more of like a circular pattern. So it breaks the space up a little bit more. I gotta make sure to blend this stuff down here. All right, so I feel pretty good about that with my background, but there's no rush for you all. I'm gonna start to put some black and blue down on my palette just to get it ready for when we move on to the flower part, but do not feel rushed through this. If you're still working on that background, take your time. If you're doing orange, you could also throw some like red back there. That would look really pretty. Or if you have orange and yellow, you could throw some yellow in on top of the orange, mix it in a similar way. If one of you could turn your mic on when you feel good about your background and just let me know that that's where you're at, I would really appreciate it, because then I'll just start to move forward.
I think my background is okay for now, but I'll throw some red on later.
Yeah, I'm good too.
Okay, great. Thank you all. It's hard when we're doing it over Zoom because I'm like, I can't see how far you all are. So I'm going to put some black down on my palette. You probably have like an ivory black or something of the sort. So whatever black you have, you'll want to put that down, because we're going to use some black for this main circular part right here of the flower. And then I'm going to start with a blue base for this flower. I think I have a primary blue. I'll probably use this primary blue for the main. I don't have a ton of it, so I'll probably use that for the main shapes. And then what we'll do is we'll add some other colors on top of the petals too. So whatever blue you have, a darker one might be a little bit better, because we're going to do some lighter colors on top. So as long as it's not like baby blue. Okay. So using this same brush that I used for the background, I'm going to use to just draw the black circle of the flower over here in the corner. It can be whatever size you want. I'm going to try to make sure it's not too small or too big. But what I do is I just take my paintbrush, dip it in the black, and then I just draw a circle. So you're going to round, I'm actually going to pick this up a little bit. But you're going to start at the bottom and then round it around. And you can see, like, my black here is actually pretty watery, which is surprising. It's almost like a watercolor. But that's just my general shape. I might actually make it a little bit bigger, because I feel like if it's too small, it's going to look puny there in the corner. So I'll probably bring it up a little bit. Yeah, so I didn't add water to this second layer of black that I'm adding to spread this out, and I noticed that it's not as thin. So if you have a paint that's kind of watery anyways, don't feel like you need to add water to it. Some acrylic is really thick and you have to add water so that it'll move. Let's see, so I want to bring this piece up a little bit. I don't think that all flowers are exactly the same, so don't feel like you have to make your shapes exactly the same as mine, because I'm sure that I will be like working to clean this up the whole time obsessively. But I've got like my general middle of the flower shape down here, and I feel good about it. I want to make sure that it's big enough. So while you're working on that, you can just start to fill the whole thing in with black. What we're going to do is we're going to fill this part in first to give it some time to dry while we work on the petals. That way we can go back in over top of this black and add the yellow details or the orange details at the middle of the flower. when you're looking at this black shape without petals on it, it looks pretty wonky. So if you're like, oh, that looks a little bit weird, try not to overthink it. Because it'll look a little bit weird until we add these petals on.
I can't draw a semicircle or a proper circle, so yours looks great.
I can't either, which is, I always laugh. People are like, oh, but like you work in art. And I'm like, that's why we have erasers and rulers. Like, I'm not capable of drawing a straight line or like a perfect circle to save my life.
Right.
Yeah, my black is so watery, it just looks gray and all the lines are showing.
Maybe let it set and dry. And then what we'll do is we'll do some of these blue petals and maybe put a layer on top of it. It might just need layered a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I promise, Elle, next year on campus, whenever we do these, we're going to have better paints. I didn't realize how watery those were, but they were all that I had here from my supply that I took from the school. So I apologize to you and Dominique if you're having problems with those. But, you know, we're going to record this and everything. So if for some reason you want to give it another try, just holler at me and I'll get you guys a canvas.
Okay, I'll just go back over it later.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just like standing here staring at this, trying to decide. I think I'm going to make this a little bit wider. This is my own personal preference. Yeah, I feel better about that. Okay, so when everyone, or at least a few people have their, you know, their black center flower shapes down, feel good about it and you're ready to move on to the blue petals, just let me know. And you can go ahead and put some blue down on your your palette. My paint water is getting really gross looking. And for the petals, I'm going to do actually a smaller brush because what we're going to do is essentially the same thing we did here, but we're going to, you know, trace these shapes out first before we fill them in. So I've got a smaller brush with a little bit more of a pointier end. If you have one like this, that would be good too. Whatever you have, something that's rounded or maybe just a little bit smaller would be better than a square. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the blue petals. If anyone has any objections, just let me know. I'm gonna actually put a little bit more blue on my palette because we're gonna use a basic blue as the first layer on these. So it'll probably take a good amount, to be completely honest. All right. So I'm gonna start with this first petal here. And you can see in the reference image, the petal comes up pretty far. It comes up at least 3/4 of the way of the canvas. So I'm gonna kind of just eyeball it here. Start at a point and trace down. And you can see like this blue on top of this orange is kind of pukey looking, and that's fine. Once we layer some more paints on top, it won't look pukey looking anymore. And if you feel like it still is and you're like, oh my gosh, this looks terrible, because I don't know if you all can see this, but you can definitely see through my blue right now. You can mix a little bit of white with it and it might give it a little bit more pigment so it doesn't shine through as much. But I'm gonna go through and draw all of these. So this is the first one, just a general basic shape. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're gonna go over top of it and fill it in and add detail. This is just our basic outline. And then I'm gonna start here with my other petal. I'm gonna have it curl up into a little bit of a point and then bring it down. And this is almost like we're just sketching it with a paintbrush. So you can see here that these petals kind of lay on top of each other. So I'm gonna get this halfway down here with this little pointy shape. And then I'm gonna start the point of my other flower petal over in this area. And bring it down to meet it. And this is a good time if you feel like, because I honestly might feel like that. I'm looking at this and trying to decide. If you feel like maybe your dark black circle isn't big enough, you can make it a little bit bigger right now. Because I really pulled my petals up far. And then I'm just gonna bring this other side down here. This petal's gonna come off the canvas. And if you feel like your shapes are crazy, that's okay, because once we start to really put on our like layers of color, it'll come together. And right now where we're just doing this base, it's gonna look crazy for a little bit. So you all can see that mine doesn't look exactly like this painting. And that's okay. I do realize now with the way that I'm painting the petals, because they're so large, I'm gonna make this black spot, I think, just a little bit bigger. Nothing crazy, but just to make it a little bit more proportional with these petals. So once you have your petal shapes down where you're like, oh, okay, that looks like I'm good with that. You can start to just fill them in solid blue. but I am going to really quickly go in and make my dark circle for my flower just a little bit larger. And since this is acrylic, the thing that I love about acrylic rather than oil is that you can paint on top of things. Right now my flower looks like a wonky abstract hand or something. All right. Yeah, I feel better about that. I think that piece needed to be a little bit bigger. And you all can tell by looking, if you take a look and you're like, oh, it looks like the middle of that flower might be a little too small for the petals. You can make that space a little bit bigger. So I'm just gonna clean that brush out really quickly because I used my large brush on the black part. And then hop back to this blue. Now that I feel pretty good about these shapes, more so, I'm gonna start layering my blue paint on top. Now, like I said, your orange might show out from underneath and it might look really ugly, and that's okay because we're gonna add several colors of purple and lighter blues and white on top to give the petals more definition. But we wanna start with a flat blue base of color. And I already need more blue, so. I'm gonna have to stock up on some more primary blue. I'm cutting it close. And like, I noticed that I don't love the way this petal's shaped, so I'm gonna make it a little bit rounder at the top. Just so it's like a little bit curvier. And once you get a basic layer done for one petal, because I'm sure you all can see the like orange line that's happening here, which is pretty normal. What I'm gonna do is get this blue down, let it dry, and then go over it again. I feel like we need some like elevator music or something. It's so quiet. This looks less like an abstract hand the more paint I add to it, and I feel better about that because at first I was like, oh, Lord.
I think it looks like flames.
It does right now, yeah. Looks like blue flames in all orange.
It's okay though.
Yeah. It'll look much more like a flower by the end. So once you've used a whole tube of blue, and you want to make sure you bring that blue down to the edge of your black circle in the middle. Is anyone eating popcorn? I had popcorn that I was going to bring upstairs just for this, and I forgot.
I was gonna make some, but then I didn't want to get oil everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good call. I have like a little bag of like that pre-made kettle corn or whatever, and I was like, that might be a good snack. But I didn't want to like crunch in your ears. Okay.
I didn't make popcorn, so I'm just drinking a glass of Pinot Noir. I turned it into Pinot and paint.
Oh, nice. Okay. So I'm going to give this a second, just like my base layer of blue to dry. And then I'm going to go over top of it with some more blue, specifically like in this area here. And then I don't know if you all can see this from this, but it's very like kind of muddy looking through here just because of the orange coming through. So if you give it a second to let it dry, acrylic dries really quickly, you can go over it with another layer and that'll cover some of that up. And this is a good time too to take a look at the reference photo. See how you feel about your petals? Like I'm looking at right now and I'm like, nah, I want this to come out a little bit more right here. So this is a good time when we're getting this base layer down to work on the shape of your flower petals.
Mine still has a lot of orange showing through because the blue was pretty watery too.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a lot of orange peeking through up here. So I'm just gonna go back over it let it sit a little bit. And this might drive you all crazy, but I have a tendency to kind of just, you know, work as I go and eyeball things. And so I was looking at this and I'm like, oh, my flower petals are really huge. And now my little black spot looks tiny in comparison. So I'm adding a little more to it. And it's good to do these things now because once we start to add details in, you're not going to really be able to make those big changes. Okay. So I'm just going to go over some of my orange spots, hit them with another thicker layer of blue on top really quickly just to cover them a little bit so they're not so yucky looking. More than likely these will be covered when we do because we're going to do a light blue next on top of these. Got some orange down here. I'm covering up a little bit. And if you have some like brush strokes from layering, that's not a bad thing if you're okay with that. Some people like to blend a little bit more obsessively, but I like having heavier brush strokes. I think it's fun. Okay, so I feel pretty good about my blue layer. It's pretty dark right now on top of this orange, but we're gonna lighten it up big time. So once you have your blue layer down, there's no rush at all. If you're still working on it, that's totally fine. What we're gonna do next is take blue and white, and we're gonna mix a very light blue because we're gonna do a full layer of light blue next on these petals. So you can use the same blue that you used or a different blue. I'm gonna try to use the same blue, I think. If I run out of my primary blue, I might have to switch to a different blue, but that's okay. And you're probably going to need a good amount of white too. Because we're going to be covering each petal with a thick layer of this. And then once I get this mixed, I'm working on mixing it right now. I'll show you all what I mean. And for these petals, we're going to do some wet on wet painting, which causes that pretty streaking in the middle that we've seen in the reference photo. Which basically just means that instead of letting all the petals dry completely before we add the next layer, we layer paint on top so it blends with the wet paint that's underneath. So if you ever hear people say something about wet on wet painting, that's what they mean. Okay. So this is the blue that I have. It's like a baby blue. Is everyone good with me moving on to this part?
I am.
Okay, cool. So if you all can see this, like in the reference photo, there are some like dark edges to the petals, right? And we don't want to lose that. So we're not going to cover the entire petal, but we're going to do the inner pieces. So just kind of make an outline. See, I left this blue streak here because we're going to blend this a little more. And if you accidentally go over a little bit, it's not a big deal because I think what we'll do is just take a little bit of this initial blue and go over the edge so it blends it together. That's what creates that streaking. But this is a good way to get our base of petals down. So I'm going to start and go ahead and just fill in a general shape here. Not super heavy, but enough coverage. It's got a little bit of variation in there. You can still see some of the dark coming out underneath, which is kind of fun. But it's definitely a lot lighter than that dark blue on the orange. And then we're going to do a similar thing over here. I'm going to leave this outline, leave the tip of this petal darker, and we're going to do this with all these. The tips will be darker and they'll all have a little bit of an outline, and that'll create the definition of the petals laying. So I'm almost making like a smaller version of the same shape within it. And you can kind of decide where your dark line is going to be in here to give that petal effect. And it doesn't have to be like perfect. But I'm like, okay, so I'm going to bring this down to about here. And if you feel like it's not looking exactly like the shape you want, don't panic because we're going to go back over top of these edges a little bit with this dark blue once we've gotten all of our other colors on, and that'll finish it off. The biggest thing right now is just to make sure that you leave that dark blue outline on the outside. And my paint is not moving super smoothly, so I added a little more water to it. If you like the kind of dry look, the textured look, you don't need to add water to your brush. That's up to you entirely. Some people kind of like that textured dry brush look. But I felt like my paint wasn't really moving around well enough, so I added a little bit of water to it. I'm just gonna do the same thing in here. So I'm just going in and filling these in a little bit. They don't have to be perfectly solid light blue shapes. If some of the blue from underneath is peeking out, that's not a bad thing. And I'm doing brush strokes that follow the motion, like the movement of the petal. If you accidentally covered up your dark petal definition lines that I left in here, that's not a big deal because I'm gonna end up having to like go in on my own painting and add those back in a little bit because I got excited and covered mine up. And you can do that with like wet on wet paint if you want, or you can wait till it dries and do it like that. Yeah, that's way better. Okay. So once you will have your light blue layer down, let me know. There's no rush. The next step of what we're gonna do is we're gonna take that same blue and go back over the edges and blend it on top so that it has that nice gradient like there is in the reference photo. And then after that, we'll start our purple. It's always interesting to watch paintings come together towards the end, because when you get to this stage in the painting, you're like thinking that it looks like trash. Or at least I always do. And then you just kind of have to push through and keep working on it. And once you start bringing the like finishing details together, it looks so much better. Okay. So I'm going to start working on my outline, a little bit of this blue streak. When I say the outline, what I mean is the edges here. We're going to blend those back in right through there, right here at the tops. So you're going to take the exact same blue that you use, the flat blue, not with white or anything. And at the top, you're just going to lightly pull it back in. So what I'm doing is I'm just going over the edge of that light blue that we just put down and pulling that original blue over top of it and lightly pulling it down so that it streaks in with the light blue. And we're only going to do this at the top, the points of the petals, because down here towards the center, we're going to be doing that with purple. And you want to make some lines if you want it to mimic the flow of the petal. So I'm making some defined line brush strokes in here. We'll be going over our last step on these petals after we do the purple is we're going to go with some white highlights and do some similar brush strokes on top for the highlights so that it'll all blend together. Now, if you don't like heavy brush strokes and you're just doing blending, feel free to do that instead and create that really soft gradient. And I feel like, I don't know if you all can see this, some of my dark blue, where it was so heavy on that orange background, is still peeking through a little bit. Still, like I can see a little bit of a line, so I'm just layering up, giving it a second to dry and then adding another layer on. soften up these edges in here. And I'm going to take some of my, and you all can do this or not, I took another brush, took some of that light blue, and I'm just blending it back over top with another brush. A pro to acrylic is that it dries really fast. Also a con to acrylic is that it dries really fast. So sometimes when you're trying to do these blending things and create these really pretty brush strokes, you have to kind of go back in with a couple layers just to really get the look that you want because it dries so quickly. So I added a little bit more of the space blue. Just realized I needed to check the time, see where we're at, but I think we're good. And I'm just working on these edges through here just to give you all some time. So whenever you all are ready to move on, just let me know. I just don't want to rush you. I'm not in a hurry, and we're pretty far along. And you'll want to make sure you still have some of these dark lines in here to define the petals. If you've painted over them, it's not a big deal at all. Just take your blue, like a dark blue or even a black if you feel like it's not dark enough, and just create those lines again with your brush. It just gives a little bit more definition so it's not all one blob. If you have already finished the edges of your blue, like blending them in of the edges of the petals, you can go ahead and put some purple on your palette because that is the next color that we are going to be adding in before we add the highlights to the petal. So my purple, I need to check, I have a couple of different purples. Some of my purples almost look red. So I'm using this dioxazine purple because I have another one that's more of a red color. So I like the way that this one looks.
Hannah, I think what Elle and Dominique have, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, is more of like a lavender type of purple. That's what
That'll work perfectly fine.
I thought that would be kind of pretty and to like make it a little bit deeper with the blue.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that'll look great. Yeah, one of the purples that I have is like, I don't know if you can see it from, probably not, but like it's a hot pink. It's not even really a purple. So that would look kind of weird, but a lavender would be really pretty. And then I'm going to put myself on mute really quickly and go freshen up my paint water because it's really grungy looking and sometimes it gets into your paintbrush. Okay, if no one has any objections, now that I am good with fresh paint water, I'm going to move on to the purple. And if your purple is different than mine, that's totally okay. I know everyone has, their colors are a little bit different. So I'm going to start with this purple. It's hard for you all to see this in realistic colors on a computer screen, but I'm going to start with this purple. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to start at the black at the base of the petal and pull up and create those brush strokes. So I'm going to start over here, and we want to come up about a third of the way. And you're going to pull up very lightly. And it's going to primarily be in the center of your petal that you have this purple. It's going to be a little bit darker here and get lighter. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this base purple, and then we're going to throw a lighter purple on top of it just to give that blending feel. So I'm going to go all throughout here, pull my paintbrush up to create those streaks. And I actually turned my paintbrush on my side, on its side, just so it gets a little bit more of a point and I can create a little more line work, similar to the lines through here. So if you're trying to get more of a line work, try turning your paintbrush on its side and using it like that. And none of these have to be like the brush strokes and where the purple goes on each petal doesn't have to be exactly the same. You can get crazy and have it reach up further in some areas and not so much in others. A little more water in mine. Okay, and since this blending of these colors in the petals works so well when you have wet paint on wet paint, I'm going to go ahead and add some white to my palette. Since I've got my purple down, I feel good about it. Gonna throw some white down and just take that same purple, blend some white in, or blend it in with the white. That way you still have a little bit of purple there to work with in case you need a darker purple. Once you all get to this point, you can do that. There's no rush. It's good to do this while the paint is still wet. I'm going to take that lighter purple and go over top of the dark in the middle and pull it up. And it's good to rotate back and forth on these. So I started with the darker, and then we're going to go over top with a lighter version of it to give it that blending look up into the petals. And then I'll take my dark purple again and just blend it over the edge here. So it's a lot of working back and forth on this. And you want to try to get your purple overall to have a similar shape, like they're all the same length, like your dark gradient of purple is all lined up. So hopefully you all can see some of the purple gradient in there. I know it's hard with glare and stuff.
It looks so good.
I realized, I'm like, wow, I made my flower way different than the example painting, but that's okay. So I'm gonna just sit for a second, let you all work on these purple details. So like I said, keep that dark purple down here at the bottom towards near your black circle that we're gonna be working on. And then use that light purple to fan out in the middle a little bit. And don't mind me, I'm just going and being picky about the way that I'm wanting these to look. So no rush. When you are done with your purple and you're like, this is it, I feel good about it, I don't want to do anymore, we are going to just take a very light blue, like this light blue that we'll use, but then add more white to it. Essentially, it's going to be very like a tinted white basically, and we'll go through and add some highlights. And then we'll move on and add some of our texture through here for our flower. And then we'll add our little ladybug, because I want to make sure I don't keep you all past 8. But I think we're good on time. And this is me being picky about this petal, because there's something about it that's like driving me insane. So I'm just working on it while you all work on your purple, because I don't want you all to feel rushed. I am in no hurry. And if a color isn't dark enough for you, like you feel like it's a little bit see-through, adding some black or some white will help with that. Now, obviously, that'll change your color a little bit, but you can adjust with that. Now, in the future, if you all want to be super obsessive about how your petals look, I'm basically saying this to myself, but this is a fun fact for you all too. You can get a little stick of charcoal and do an outline or a sketch of what you want your petals or any other shape to look like, and it will just wipe off. So it won't stay on your canvas, which is really nice. So you can use it to sketch, and then it'll just, you can take some water and it'll come right back off, or it'll be covered with the paint and it won't come through. So it's kind of a handy little trick if you're trying to get a general idea of shape down. Okay, I am going, is that paint wet? I can't tell. No. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add some more white to my to my palette. I'm sorry. Add some more white, and then I'm going to use that same blue that we've been using throughout. I'm just going to add a little, like the tiniest drop of blue. And I will try to show you all as best as I can what this will look like, because these highlights that we're going to do on the petals aren't a stark white, but they are pretty bright, and you're not going to need a lot. Like if you all can see this, and I've got a lot going on, this color specifically right here. So it's pretty light. I mean, some people would consider this to be white, but I did add a little bit of blue, so it just gives it a little bit of tint to match the colors in the flower. What we want to do with this white is just add some very light highlights that follow the shape of the petal. So like nothing crazy. I'm just going in, adding some lines. Like that. It just gives it a little bit more definition and some highlights. Now I will say keep your highlights up through here. You don't want them down here in this dark purple, because that doesn't make as much sense, but you can bring them into the lighter purple and in this light blue here in the middle. And same as the other colors, you just want to follow the stroke of the petal, that shape and that motion. And I need to get my paint wet a little bit because it's not moving super well. And you can make larger brush strokes doing this and use smaller ones too. A little bit of variation is good to have some thinner ones and maybe a couple of broader ones. All right. So I'll let you all do that, add those highlights to your petals. And then the next thing that we're gonna wanna do, once you finish your petals, whether you used a yellow background or an orange background, since I used orange, I'm gonna do a light orange center on this flower. It's really gonna pop with that blue, which will be interesting to see. We're gonna start with a base orange that's pretty dark, and then just go in and do some lighter orange for texture. Someone's using power tools outside of my house. Hopefully you can't hear it.
You're good.
Okay. I'm like, oh. I'm just testing out my orange really quickly. Oh, that's super bright. Okay. All right, I feel good about that then. Okay, so if anyone needs me to go back over the highlights or anything, just let me know. If you were still working on your purple variations in the petals. I am happy to show you again how I did it. Okay, since we've got about 20 minutes, which should be plenty of time to do this, but I'm gonna go ahead and start. Since I have an orange background up here, I'm gonna use orange down here as well for those of you that have orange and don't have yellow. So we're gonna make a simple orange circle, and we're gonna leave a black outline. We're gonna do this in the black center that we made earlier in that round shape, the not perfect circle. But we just want to leave a little bit of a black outline all the way around it. So I'm just going to go through, take this orange, bring it all the way down to the bottom down here, and I'm leaving this black outline right here around the petals, in between the petals and this center. If you feel like your orange is too dark and it is not showing up at all on the black, add a little bit of white to it, just a smidge, and that should brighten it up for you. And if that doesn't do it, add a little bit of red. Now our background orange on this centerpiece, I don't know what the center thing of this flower is called. Now I'm very aware of that. But whatever the center thing is on the flower, we don't have to have it to be super bright because we're getting ready to go back over this with some highlights. So we're going to do some lighter orange around the edges. So it doesn't have to be like road cone orange bright. All right. I've got my base down. I feel good about that. I'm going to use a smaller brush. Wow, what am I doing? I'm going to use a smaller brush for the lighter orange in this, just because we're going to do some like what's called stippling, which is just like kind of like poking the canvas with your paintbrush, and it creates more of a texture. And I think that'll be more effective with something smaller to paint with. So I'm actually going to use this little thin guy to do that. I'm going to take that same orange that we've been using and add a little bit of white to it. Not, well, no, maybe. Let's see. I'm going to see how light I want to get this, and then I'll show you all. It's going to look kind of peachy, but I think it'll be pretty. And we'll probably have to do the center similarly to the way that we did the petals in layers. So I've got my light orange. Hopefully you all can see this. It's just, well, maybe that's better. It's like a peach color, basically. It's a little bit lighter than this background. And I'm gonna take my brush and literally just poke and make dots all around this edge of the orange. They don't have to be perfect circles because you're just gonna have that stippling texture effect. And we're gonna do this about halfway in. We want the center, what would be the center of this, to be a little bit darker. So I'm literally just taking this and just getting my brush full of paint and then just making dots. And you want this lighter color to round out. So I've got my lighter variation in there. I feel good about it, but now I feel like this on top of this is a little bit weird. You can see like this hard line here, which I don't love. I would like it to be blended together a little bit more so. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take that original orange again and stipple it on like that in the same way. So same thing, just the regular orange. I'm just gonna go in like this and leave some larger pieces of the orange on top. And then I'm gonna bring this texture all throughout the centerpiece. That way it's consistent, just because it would look kind of weird if you had some spots where there was this brush stroke back and forth and then some dots around it. So I'm just taking that original orange and just putting the little dots all over, just so that the texture is consistent through this area. And I'm just going back over the lighter orange around the edges. If you feel like it's not light enough, if you make it a little bit lighter, it will give it some more contrast. So I feel pretty good about that. I'm happy with that the way that it is. I'm gonna let you all work on that a little bit and start to put some paint out for our little ladybug. So for that, we are only gonna need black, red, and just a smidge of white for a highlight. And I'm not ignoring you all are done. I'm just giving you all some time. Don't want to rush you through anything. And if anyone has any questions or anything, feel free to turn their mic on and ask a question. We have 10 minutes, hooray.
You're like right on time, it's wonderful.
Listen, I try to not rush, but I also don't want to be like, oh, this event is for 2 hours, just kidding, you have to be here for 3, you know?
Yeah. Some of them, like the previous ones, this is before you, of course, started doing them, like the more complex ones, which that was also probably us not picking, you know, the easiest or the best for the 2-hour time frame as well. But a couple of them took like almost 3 hours to do.
Yeah, sometimes they do. And I try to look at, like, whenever we're, you know, we talk about what we're going to do, I try to think about that because I'm like, you know, some of these are like, this would take me a while. Okay, so since we've got less than 10 minutes now, I am going to go ahead and start our little ladybug. I'm going to actually put my little ladybug over here because this petal's sticking out really far, and I just feel like a ladybug right there would be cute. You can stick your ladybug wherever you want on your flower. So I've got some primary red, just a nice red color, nothing crazy. I hate this glare. I wish that I had like a amazing camera on my laptop to show you all these colors. But I've got my primary red. We're just going to use red and black mainly, and then a little bit of white. And I'm going to do the front wing first. So I'm literally just making like a half oval shape. Now my red is not crazy bright on, I don't know if you all can see this. It's not super bright on this orange because the orange is, because red makes orange, they don't necessarily pop out next to each other, but that's okay. I would recommend maybe, because I think I might do this actually. I'm going to put a little bit of white in with my red. It might have a little bit more of a pink ladybug tone, but that's okay. But it should show up a little bit better, I think. Yeah. So I've made my shape for my ladybug. Ooh. And if you're like me and you accidentally rub some paint on somewhere else, it's fine. You can just wipe it off because acrylic dries fast. So like I said, it's like a half egg shape almost, or a half oval shape you're going to make, which is going to be the front wing of your little ladybug. Once you have that down, you're going to come up a little bit further right here on top and make another little shape that mimics this. We're going to put some black lines on this. That way it's more defined. That way it's not like, what's this blob on this petal? my little pink ladybug because she wasn't really popping out on the orange. Okay. So like I said, you'll need a little bit of black. I'm gonna do the head. Feel free to take any creative license. I'm just gonna make a little circular head. Two little dots and lines that lead down to the head. I feel like maybe her head's a little bit small, so I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger. And it's good to do this with a smaller brush. This is the smallest brush I have, so I'm making it work. And then we're gonna start doing some dots. We'll take that same brush and just do some little polka dots. It might take a second. You might wanna give your red paint a second to dry because you will be painting wet on wet. But I'm gonna go ahead and do it since I'm trying to keep you all on time here. So I'm just gonna go through, make a bunch of little dots. They don't have to all look the same. It's probably better if they don't. It looks more realistic if they don't. Just add some little dots throughout. And then I'm gonna add two little dots on what would be her upper wing. I'm gonna add a little dot here and a little dot here. Gonna clean my little tiny brush off and then switch over to white.
What color are you doing those dots?
Black.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
They look kind of pink on here.
I know, everything is just kind of like blurring. Let's see if I can get that together a little bit better.
Yeah, I can see it better now.
Okay, good. Yeah, I got a little bit crazy with my ladybug. I'm gonna have to go and clean her up a little bit, but that's okay. Yep. Go back over and clean these dots up a little bit. They look a little bit crazy, but I'll probably just clean them up later. Sometimes it's easier to let the stuff dry and then go back over it. So next I'm gonna hit like the white highlight really quickly. And you just need a little bit for this. I wanna look at our visual aid so I can. So you're gonna make a white line where that wing, the wing definition would be. So you're gonna start here and just pull it over. Like a little swoop where her wings would be. And then if you want to be really cute, you can give her a couple little eyeballs. Because that's all I've done. I'll let you all see this up close a little bit. Let me adjust my light. I just added a little white line to define those two wings and then two little eyeballs. And I honestly will probably let this pinkish red dry and then I might hit it with some more red again. But like I said, because it's on that orange background, it's just not popping out super bright. Another thing that you could do is just lighten up your orange background. So if you find that things are sitting on your background color and they're not really popping the way you want to, you can make your background lighter and it'll cause everything in the foreground, like your flower and your ladybug, to pop out more so. So that's definitely an option too, if you feel like you need a little more contrast. Which I might end up doing, but I'm probably not gonna do it while we're on here because we're close on time. Does anyone have any questions for me? Any like last minute, my paint's doing something weird right here, how do I fix it type thing or anything like that? I'm just going through right now and cleaning up my little petal that I screwed up when I was painting my ladybug.
Does anyone need more time or need to like go over a certain area, or are you all pretty good?
Yeah, do not feel like we have to stick to just 2 hours. I just didn't want you all to be like, oh my gosh, this lady is not considerate of my evening at all, because I know everyone has lives and schoolwork and everything else. But I am more than happy to stay on for as long as you need me to explain anything or go over it or anything like that. I'm just going through right now and touching up stuff on my own that I'm like, oh, I don't really love the way that looks, so I'm going to touch that up right now. And I know mine wasn't exactly like the example photo, but that's okay. It's one of those happy little accidents that Bob Ross would like to talk about. All right.
I ended up with an extra petal because I didn't shape mine quite right.
That's okay. I didn't shape mine quite right either, so no worries. That's why I put my little ladybug over here, because I was like, well, I kind of like it being over here than crammed in between these two guys.
Thank you, Mona. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Mona.
All right, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.